Welcome to the Intuitive Insight Podcast. This is Timmy E, your host, your counselor, and your Sherpa for our episodic journey through mental health, counseling, and other areas of wellness and balance. Today, we are discussing and introducing Intuitive Insight Counseling to the world via the Intuitive Insight Podcast, as well as how online therapy is trying to progress the field of mental health, counseling, and psychiatry. Join us in the discussion, some nuggets of insight, and much more for you today on the Intuitive Insight Podcast. Okay, so this is actually my first podcast ever. So with all the different podcasts out there, I figured I might as well throw my hat in the game. It's always been something I've wanted to do just because I enjoy the aspect of being able to help individuals and help people and, be a positive force out in the world in some way. But in order to get to do that, perhaps the best way to kind of introduce this whole situation, this whole podcasting thing, is to introduce introduce myself and introduce a little bit about what Intuitive Insight is. To start off, I was not originally a counselor before. I actually was in the research field, in the scientific research field, psychological research field, and ultimately my journey started right after I finished my bachelor's degree. To give you a little bit of background, I finished my bachelor's degree in 2007 with a bachelor's in psychology and communications, public relations. And right away, my first position right out of college was working for the world-renowned Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City, and I was working on one of their pediatric oncology teams, working with a number of different research protocols, all designed to try to find a cure and fight pediatric cancer. So one thing that was really interesting about that position is I enjoyed it so much. I knew so much about all the different patients that were on these trials. I knew basically how they were doing, what they were experiencing every single day. And I knew about what treatments they were experiencing. I knew about when they learned about their diagnosis and what are the different things they've had in their medical history. But the one thing that really plagued me was that I never had a chance to meet them in person. I never had a chance to provide support for them in any way that I could. And it's kind of like saying, I know everything about you, but I'm in the shadows, and you can never really get a chance to know who I am. And I know that it was it's a very professional aspect of research. You're not really you don't want to get emotionally invested into that situation, especially considering that that population, those kids and their families, you wouldn't want to give them any kind of sense of false hope. But the thing that really hit me was they are fighting so hard every single day to get treatment in New York City. So ultimately, after a little bit of time, I realized that I really wanted to get more patient experience and patient interaction, and I actually switched out from New York City, and I started working in New Jersey at the Kessler Foundation in New Jersey. So shout out to Kessler, shout out to the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. These are my where my humble beginnings. And in Kessler, I ended up working with the traumatic brain injury, with the whole number of traumatic brain injury studies. And I learned a lot, and I actually was able to get a lot of experience from that because I had an opportunity to interact with traumatic brain injury survivors. I had an opportunity to interact with traumatic brain injury survivors and their families, their caregivers, and the whole process from when they come into the rehab from the rehab hospital, from the acute hospital, and then go through their process. So I saw how some patients would come out of their loss of consciousness and slowly regain consciousness, and eventually be able to slowly become alert and oriented. Times 1, times 2, times 3. I'm sure there are some individuals who understand that. Eventually start doing their rehab and their therapy and doing their occupational therapy, their physical therapy, and eventually them preparing themselves to get discharged. And the journey does not stop there, because from there, there's continued outpatient therapy that these traumatic brain injury and brain injury survivors, stroke survivors go through. And even further than that, I saw the toll that the caregivers would go through. And right away, when I saw that, my first thought was, I really want to get into the whole personal counseling, psychology, psychotherapy kind of thing, because there is really something. There are a number of interactions I've had with those with the traumatic brain injury survivors that I really, really thought was enlightening, because they were focused so much. They were so focused on trying to regain who they were, and a lot of the times, after I learned a little bit more about it, it's not so much about trying to regain who you are, more so about understanding that was part of that's a chapter in their lives, and it's more about rebuilding and understanding what you have moving forward, regaining the skills that you can and as much as you can, and utilizing all the possible strategies at your disposal in order to get back on track the best that you can. So there's a lot I learned just from that experience, and it really inspired me to go into more into the counseling world. And there's a whole other story there about how I got to that, because I was actually in a graduate program for continued research psychology, a graduate program, and I realized after my experiences with both Memorial Sloan Kettering and at Kessler that that's just not something that I can do. I need to do more. I need to do more than just study. I need to do more than just put numbers and see how they performed on certain tests and certain tasks. I needed to be able to work with them and help them and interact with them and try and help anyone that I can in any way that I can, provide that support in any way that I can, inspire, encourage, be that person. And ultimately, it caused me to drop out of my program, my graduate research program, and enter into the counseling field. And ultimately, I was able to get into a counseling master's program, had an opportunity to get everything done as best as I could, and here I am today. So that's a little bit of the background about what got me into counseling and what got me into starting my career there. Ultimately, after after gaining a lot of experience and going through the process of, I guess you could say, you call it apprenticeship, for a little bit of time, I went ahead and got all my hours in. I went ahead and completed all the different supervision that I have to do, completed all the extra classes and everything else, got my licensure, and right away ended up starting Intuitive Insight Counseling. And once I was able to practice independently, and here we are today. To put it simply, I have a couple of goals in the counseling field. The primary one is to provide aid, provide support, provide counseling services to anybody who is willing to anybody who wants to come and work with me. I've worked with a lot of individuals with individuals who have mood disorders, thought disorders, developmental disorders, career issues, addiction issues, substance abuse issues, even as noted, traumatic brain injury and brain injury issues, end of life issues, grief issues, so many different things, and even transitional issues going on in someone's life. There are so many different things that I've had an opportunity to work with that it's actually created a sense of integration for me in my counseling style. I don't believe that it's just one style that's going to fit the mold. I believe that I believe in a strength-based perspective where, hey, let's take your strengths, let's take how you look at your perspective, let's take your situation at this time, and let's utilize the best strategies, the best interventions, and the best mindsets and theoretical concepts to be able to fit your needs. And ultimately, a lot of my experiences have come from that. And my goal is to utilize your strengths and work with you to the best of my ability. I often say that, a lot of individuals who come and work with me, they often say, tell me what I need to do, give me advice. And I was taught at a very, very early time in my counseling career that it's important to understand that it's not our role to give advice. Our role is to help each individual person get to the goal that they need to get to. Whether I could provide you so many different suggestions, so many different techniques, so many different things, but ultimately, it's not up to the counselor, the clinician, to get you there. It's our prerogative to guide you to be in a place where you can do it on your own, and eventually you can go ahead and take care of everything that you need. Let's put it like this. I explain to a lot of individuals, actually, that a lot of people who I work with in the various platforms that, hey, you are the person who is the explorer on this journey, not me. You are the person who wants to go from place A, from where you are to your goal, place B. My role is not to push you there or drag you there or anything like that. My role is to guide you there. If you imagine that you're an explorer, you're a mountain explorer, you're climbing your mountain, you're climbing your Mount Everest at this time. That's a long way to go, and that's daunting. And what do? Can you do it on your own? Some people can, but others, they need a little bit of guidance. They hire a Sherpa. They find someone to go with them. They find a team of people to go with them. And that's what I am. I'm part of that team. I am that Sherpa guide, the one who will say to you, hey, these are the different paths that you can choose. Here are the different pitfalls in these paths that you can choose from. And ultimately, I am not going to tell you here is where you should go. I'm going to make these suggestions. I think based on your situation, this might be, a pretty good course of action. But ultimately, it is you, the explorer, who I leave to make that decision. Oftentimes in counseling, one of the best things to do is to allow the person to allow you to understand that here are your choices, and you have to make a choice that you believe works best for you. Whether or not it actually works out the best, or it doesn't work out to what you're expecting, the real power is in making that choice. The real power is being able to understand that you have choice. The real power is to be able to understand that you can make a choice based on the information in front of you, and to have the support from people, from your team, from within you to go ahead and forge ahead and make the choice that you want to make. It can be really, really scary, but that's the power of counseling and therapy and everything else. It's not that you can't do it. It's not that you can't do it. It's more that we always need that little bit of a push every once in a while, and that little bit of encouragement, and a little bit of that support, and a little bit of going back to basics with us, that we know that we can do this. We can achieve our goals. And that's what a lot of my goals in counseling are. Whether it's working with someone through depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, personality disorders, relationship issues, career issues, marriage issues, end-of-life issues, grief issues, anything of that nature. These are things that I always plan on helping. I always plan on being supportive. I always plan on helping individuals get to where they need to go, get to where they want to go, at the very least to the point where they have all the tools and insight and confidence and encouragement and support that they need, where they can say to me and everyone else, I got this. I can take care of this. Thank you so much for helping me. But I think I can take it from here. And as always, at the end of this journey, at the end of this climb of this mountain, for every person that I work with, what I say is, congratulations, you've gotten to where you needed to go. And it seems that you can go ahead and take care of yourself moving forward. But never forget that if you ever need my services, if you ever need a Sherpa, once again, I'm right here. Whether or not the next mountain you climb is Mount McKinley, the Alps, Kilimanjaro, that is up to you. Whenever you have another mountain to climb and you need a Sherpa, I'm right here. I'm available for you as you need. Up next, we are going to go and talk about how Intuitive Insight is focusing on the future of counseling and psychology, and what we're trying to do to implement technology into the counseling field, into mental health field. Promote and advertise through the wonderful world of podcasting. If you would like to partner with Intuitive Insight Podcast and promote your practice, service, product, or business, send an email to media@intuitiveinsightcounseling.com. All right, welcome back. So now this segment is going to be focused on how Intuitive Insight Counseling and this podcast tries to focus on progressing the field of psychology, counseling, so on and so forth, via technology. Basically, it's a little bit of what Intuitive Insight Counseling has to offer. And, well, first things first, the Intuitive Insight podcast is meant to try and cover certain topics each and every episode about counseling and mental health and psychology and concerns that everybody will experience at some point in life, whether it be an episode on depression or anxiety and mood disorders, whether it be an episode or a couple of segments on personality disorders, whether it be an episode on resilience. These are things that we will cover in various episodes of the Intuitive Insight podcast. And also, we are going to have special guests as they come along who are experts in their own fields, who are in their own way providing a sense of strength and providing services and providing a way for individuals to help individuals in each and every single way that they can, whether it be through counseling and psychology, whether it be through medicine, whether it be through research, whether it be through strength and self-defense, whether it be through discipline, whether it be through human resources and trying to do things for the community and the world. So we are going to have as many guests as we can over time here on the Intuitive Insight podcast, as well as other segments, special segments also. For example, there will be a segment on providing questions and answers right here on the Intuitive Insight podcast. It's the Intuitive Insight mailbag. Send questions that you have regarding counseling, psychology, mental health, psychiatry, relationships, anything that you need that we can try and provide some answers for you or some suggestions for you, please go ahead and send us an email at media@intuitiveinsightcounseling.com. And once we have a number of questions, I will go ahead and try to answer some right here on the Intuitive Insight podcast during the Intuitive Insight mailbag segment. So who knows, you might have your question answered there, but that means it's important to always continue listening to the Intuitive Insight podcast as we drop episodes regularly moving forward. So going now about how Intuitive Insight focuses on progressing the field of mental health counseling and psychology. The big thing here is that Intuitive Insight Counseling, and I particularly am a big fan of the internet, as do a lot of the new generation, the millennial generation, focus a lot on the internet. And the internet has become a way of life. And ultimately, the internet is kind of a newer phenomenon that exploded into the 1990s. If you can remember America Online as one of the first major sources of internet and how it became a consumer-based service, that if any one of y'all can remember that, the dial-up modems and everything else like that, I'm sure you can remember when it would take 5 minutes to download a picture or 5 minutes to actually sync into a website. And we didn't even have some of these terms like we had before, like syncing, the cloud, nothing like that. So the internet has changed the world. In my personal opinion, it's the invention that changed the world. Very similarly to how in earlier generations, it was radio that changed the world. And then it was TV that changed the world. The internet up to this point, especially for those who are of the younger audience, the internet is what changed the world. It changed the world forever. Who knows what's going to happen next in terms of technology? But the human race and the human condition is so awesome in that we are able to go and take this technology and bring it forward and progress it forward into this way. And like everything else, counseling, psychology, mental health, psychiatry, medicine, these all benefited with the advent of the internet. In some way, just like in some industries, some industries faltered because of the internet, and others boomed and saw a boon in their industries because of this new way of reaching people and connecting with people. And Intuitive Insight and e-counseling is one of those same ways, ultimately. How do we do that? There's so many different counseling platforms out there now on the internet that I definitely am a part of. Intuitive Insight Counseling is a part of, such as Talkspace, BetterHelp, Breakthrough, eTherapy. There's so many different ones. OnlineTherapy.com. There's so many different ones. It's just about finding the right platform that fits your needs. And for example, on Talkspace, which is one of the platforms that Intuitive Insight is on, their motto is it's kind of like having a therapist in your pocket. Some individuals are a little bit wary of that motto, some are not, but ultimately the purpose of this is to be able to have access to your counselor, therapist, as you need. Now, the traditional therapy model is where we come in once a week for X amount of weeks, and we work on things. But with online therapy, you have an opportunity to interact with your clinician when you want. Now, does this mean that your clinician is going to interact with you right away, immediately? Likely not. However, if with some of these platforms, because I myself personally check messages once every day, once every couple of days, you're more likely to get a response regarding your needs more regularly and without having to wait a week for an in-office session. Now, do I offer in-office sessions? Yes, I do offer in-office sessions. I have offered in-office sessions in the past, but I'll be very upfront. Now because of the travel schedule, it's becoming a little tougher for me. So now a lot of the focus of Intuitive Insight Counseling is trying to move into the direction of online counseling and utilizing these online counseling platforms. Once again, there are going to be some individuals who are a little bit wary of it and others who are so excited for it. For me, at Intuitive Insight Counseling and the Intuitive Insight podcast, I very much am a big proponent of trying to grow the profession, trying to grow the connection between clinicians and their clients. I believe very, very much that when we have a new technology, we should do everything we can to see how we could utilize it for our purposes, for our good, for the good of other people. And now, as we are getting more and more into technology and more into finding platforms that are HIPAA compliant, are secure, are private, and also provide connection, the more likely we are to be able to engage and seek out mental health counseling, psychotherapy, and look into our issues, look into gaining a sense of awareness and insight on ourselves and on our issues that we may not have had a chance to before. I think ultimately with the advent of online therapy and how Intuitive Insight kind of is part of it, the biggest thing I think for a lot of people in the past was the stigma of, quote, having to go to therapy, having to go into an office, being seen at an office. And, that stigma still lives on to this day. And it's a terrible stigma to have about, oh, you're going to see somebody, you're working with somebody. There's no shame in actually understanding that there's something that's causing difficulty for you. In fact, I kind of liken it to, if you have car issues, would you not call your car mechanic? If you get stuck on the road and you have a tire blowout and you don't have a tire with you, are you not going to try to call AAA and see if they can find some way to get a tire out to you and get your tire changed and so you can be on your way? Similarly to a doctor, if you're having a medical issue, if you're having some kind of medical issue that won't go away, would you try to live with it, or would you try and do the best that you can to say, oh, hey doc, I've had this medical issue for a little while now. I've been trying to deal with it, but it doesn't seem to be getting any better. In the same way, there's not as much stigma in those things, because this provides a point in which, hey, I know that I need help here. I know that this is something I can't. That what I'm trying to do and how I'm trying to handle it is just something, it's beyond my grasp. And maybe seeking help will help me learn more strategies, help me learn a little bit more about what's going on with me, so that way I could get a better handle on it, and maybe the next time something like this happens, I won't need to call for help right away because I can handle it on my own. For example, I'm not sure how many, one of the things that all motorists eventually have to learn is how to change a tire. In my experience, I've learned how to change a tire. My dad taught me how to change a tire. It was, he sat down and told me, this is something you have to do. You have to learn how to change a tire. Do I do it? And it came in handy when I actually had a flat tire. And I had a donut, and I was able to do it. Now, in that same situation, if I had two flat tires, would I still need help? Oh, absolutely. But since I only had one flat tire, I would be able to go ahead and take care of the issue myself and move on along until I got a replacement full tire. If I had not learned that skill or that technique or that experience from someone who was willing to teach me, someone who was willing to help me learn that, there's a higher chance that I would be stuck on the road when I have a donut and I don't have the knowledge to change the tire, and I would have to call for help. It's about absorbing all our different experiences. It's about absorbing all the different skills and things that we learn over time. And it's the same thing with any kind of medical issue, any kind of psychological issue, any kind of issue that we have. We seek out help as we need. It's our choice to seek out help if we need and if we want. And and the big part of it is to be able to gain more skills, more understanding, more knowledge, more awareness, and more insight in order to help us succeed, in order to help us grow as individuals. It's a journey out there. It's a journey of life. It's not just, goal A to goal B, goal C. There's so many different stops on the way. And online counseling and here at Intuitive Insight, we want to make sure that just like anything else, if you need help, if you want to help, if you choose to get help, counselors out there in any way, in office, online, so in any medium, we are willing to help. It's not about feeling weak. It's not about thinking you're not strong enough. It's more about understanding that, hey, I want to learn a different way of handling something. And hopefully this way and other ways that I've already learned will help me get a better handle of what's going on with me. So that's really how counseling works. And now that there's a new option out there of going online and getting counseling, getting therapy, working with psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, licensed clinical social workers, so on and so forth. There's less chance of people trying to feeling that stigma of reaching out and trying to get help, because they now have another outlet, another platform, another venue of getting help. And that's that's a big reason of why Intuitive Insight Counseling and Intuitive Insight Media, Intuitive Insight Podcast is very, very, very focused on trying to progress the field of mental health and counseling through online platforms such as BetterHelp, Talkspace, Breakthrough, eTherapy, and so on. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or stories regarding your mental health, balance, or counseling journey, which you'd like to share on a future Intuitive Insight mailbag, please send them to media@intuitiveinsightcounseling.com. At the end of each episode, we try to sum everything that we've talked about into small bits of insight that tries to inspire others and ourselves to build upon our own awareness and insight, as well as to help us in our journey of living a balanced life. It's time for the Insight of the Night. Today's first episode of the Intuitive Insight podcast focused a lot on how Timmy E, your host, your counselor, your Sherpa, got his start in the counseling field. It was from humble beginnings and actually wasn't even supposed to be a counselor to begin with. But that is the interesting aspect of the journey of our life. The interesting aspect of the journey of finding ourselves is that we find ourselves to be in positions where we never thought we'd be. And although it's taken a long time, it has taken a lot of work, it's taken a lot of dedication, here I am, Timmy E, hosting the Intuitive Insight podcast and trying to bring my own little brand of counseling, psychology, wellness, and balance into the rest of the world. Perhaps it's certainly not the only brand out there. It's certainly, and there are so many other individuals out there who are a great fit for everybody. I believe very much that as long as we as counselors and I as a counselor do our best to provide services, to provide the aid that we can for each and every one that comes and wants to work with us, then that is ultimately what we as counselors are meant to do. We also discussed about how intuitive insight and online and the internet has changed the game for the counseling field, for psychology, for psychiatry. And now, after some time, it's finally getting to the point where perhaps there are more and more people out there who are willing to try and seek the mental health aid that they need, the psychology help, the psychiatry help that they need because of the internet, the advent of HIPAA-compliant interactions, the advent of HIPAA-compliant video conferencing, HIPAA-compliant audio conferencing is a huge, huge step for the field of counseling, mental health, and psychiatry, psychology, into connecting with more and more people. And perhaps with the stigma perhaps it plays a role in trying to lessen the stigma of having mental health issues and trying to treat it as another way of finding help for ourselves. Once again, if we are stuck on the side of the road and we don't have the tools, what do? We call for help. We call the people that we believe are important to us and can help us for help. If we have a medical issue, we call our doctor for help if it's not been going away for a while. And in the same way, in the same sense, why won't we call on a mental health professional, a psychologist, a counselor, a psychiatrist, a licensed clinical social worker to help us if we are having difficulties in our life? Ultimately, the goal of counseling, psychology, psychiatry is to provide balance for our life, whether it's through medication, whether it's through intensive therapy, and whether it's through just having an opportunity to discuss about what's going on with us. All we are trying to do is to provide an outlet for a well-balanced life. That's all for this episode of the Intuitive Insight Podcast. I hope that there was something that helped bring a little bit of insight into your life. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to take the journey with us to build your insight, subscribe to the Intuitive Insight Podcast. Check out intuitiveinsightmedia.com for updates for our next episode. As always, this is Timmy E of the Intuitive Insight Podcast, and don't forget, strong on our own, more powerful together. Have a great night.